Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar, and once again, this is my opinion. Given this is a family sitcom revolving around the Barones, marriage, romantic relationships, and all the possible dynamics is one topic that the show does cover multiple times. As we've seen from some of the reviews I've already done of this show, Everybody Loves Raymond started covering this as far back as the first season. We're, of course, talking about episode 7, Your Place or Mine. Now, this is an episode that the basic plot could have happened in any of the seasons. I know that's a comment you've heard a lot from me, but it's something worth repeating for some of the episodes as we go along through this first season and a little bit in the second season. It's just the way that it goes about and the specifics involving the non-Frank and Marie characters. It'd be a little bit harder to pull off in later seasons because of the dynamics being different. Like, once Robert moves out, it'd be a bit harder to move him in there in the same way, but it is still possible. It's definitely still possible to pull off Ray and Debra in the same manner. You just gotta adjust things to account for their kids being older and also the fact that it's not the first year. But the plot is that Frank and Marie have had a fight. Marie gets tired of it and storms across the street to complain to Ray and Debra. And as she puts it, that man has been standing across the street for 45 years, going over many things. And the first couple ones seem reasonable. Then she says, "You're clipping them too short." She clips his toenails. Well, I guess that's one of the things between them. Frank comes in, and we find out what the argument was over. It was over Frank's lunch, a tuna salad sandwich. They have a little back and forth, which leads to one of my favorite Frank Barone isms, where he mentions that sandwich was tuna slop. And Marie, rightfully I will say, says, "You have the nerve to say slop to me after I worked hard to make that?" And then Frank, without missing it, he goes, "Yes, slop to you, slop to you." One of my favorite little Frank Barone isms, and if you actually look at the little Peter Paul Frank Barone tribute I have on the page, it's actually one of the lines that gets the biggest reaction in the comment section. Slap! Well, Marie decides that that's it, and she's going to stay there. And if she tells Frank, "You can chop your own damn celery." Now, it's a little funny, but I find it hard to believe that Frank does not know where the knives are at their house. He's been there for a couple decades. You would think he'd at least know in passing where they are. Works well for comedy, but it's a line that's like, really? I don't see Frank being that stupid. Now, from there on, Marie is at Ray and Debra's house for a majority of the episode. She's cleaning up, refolding stuff. At first, you can tell that Ray and Debra are not liking it as they would. And it's one of those things that when you watch, you're like, "Oh, this is my in-law, me put my foot down." It's like, you don't go into my room and refold my stuff without asking. You don't go through my dishes without asking like this. This is an episode that really nails home how much of a busybody Marie can be. I mean, it comes from love, as Ray says at different points in both this episode and in other episodes. But it's one of those things where it's like, even if it comes for love, you gotta put her in her place and let her know this is not appropriate. And this episode kind of helps nail that, even though it's not really fully followed in later episodes. But again, like I said a couple times, that's the loose continuity of sitcoms. With this episode, because of the switch dynamics, while Marie is at Ray and Debra's, Ray, and when he comes over, Robert essentially become man-children. Because at one point, Ray is the one at the house with Marie, and Debra goes across the street to stay with Frank. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself with this. Because Ray is the first one that goes across the street. He meets Frank. Frank's just sitting around in his underwear. He's lounging about having fun. He went to the supermarket, as he says, for the first time in 30 years, which, like with the knives, I find it hard to believe that Frank has not been to the supermarket in a couple decades. I mean, it's a nice little throwaway line, but I think this is one aspect of his character that they just wrote it as a throwaway line and they didn't really intend it to be seriously. Or they decided to either retcon it with later episodes or make it to where he liked the supermarket so much that he decided to keep going. Just one of those weird ones that are like, yeah, right. But from a logic standpoint, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I could see him not going to the supermarket regularly, but in general, no. He's relaxing about. He's got them remote modified. He's got salsa to have a little fiesta. And of course, he's got the complete works of Arnold Schwarzenegger up to that time, except for Junior, or as Frank calls it, the one where he gets pregnant. It's gonna be a fun night. Terminator 2 and salsa. Ray'll be back. The reason that Ray and Debra each go across the street to speak with Frank instead of trying to put their foot down with Marie is because she gives them the look and is like, yes, dear. And they end up both going, I'm going for a walk. It's like, it makes me wonder what would have happened in the episode if they had actually talked with her. But then you lose some of the comedy and you don't have an episode. So that's a part of it where you got to throw logic out the window, despite me mentioning the whole thing a bit earlier about putting your foot down. There is some wiggle room. Now, once Debra goes across the street, Ray becomes essentially a man-child. Gets chocolate milk made by Marie. She makes him steak pizzaiola, which is the first mention of that dish. It's one of Ray's favorite dishes. Which it makes me wonder how you make steak pizzaiola if it's a real dish. Sounds the way that they always are talking it up, it just sounds like something that'd be excellent. It's first mentioned, it's mentioned again in season 2, and they mentioned it off and on again for later episodes. Definitely a dish that'd be interesting to try if it does exist. Robert does stop by. He's surprised to see Marie over there, but this is after he goes home and sees that Debra's there. He's like, that's Mom's chair. Him and Ray get into a fight, which is why I say they revert to man-children, because the way that their dynamic is there is like, so that's how it was when they were growing up together. While they're reverting to a sense of being children again, Debra is hanging out with Frank across the street. At first, things are going fine, but then, as he's doing nothing but watching TV and then trying to make her do things for him, just like Marie did. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean like getting him ice cream. She finally has a conversation with him where Marie was tired, probably, and that's what led to her finally snapping. That their dynamic between one another is excellent. I mean, Frank needs someone to do something for him. She needs to do something for someone. And of course, this is one of my favorite little editing things where Debra goes, no woman wants to be the mommy all the time. Who, cuts to Marie, who wants Bubba? Which goes for a good laugh, but it also complements Debra's point that they need each other that way. Their marriage, especially as the show goes on, you really do see that they love each other. But with this episode, it shows they kind of have this weird little symbiosis with one another. Frank needs stuff, Marie gives stuff. And while it might not seem the best, especially from a modern viewpoint, like, this is not really a good marriage, it works for them, and this is not all we see between them. It's just one of the dynamics. You can definitely see, okay, so that's why the marriage has lasted as long as it has. And the episode for them does end on a nice little note where Frank does come across the street and say he's going to the store if Marie wants to come. She sees that as an apology. He says, I just ran out of salsa. And she's like, salsa? And even though it's only been a handful of hours, Frank does end with this classic line, a lot's changed since you've been gone. It's usually a line you would leave for something when it's been maybe half a year, a couple weeks, a lot longer than a couple hours, but it works still. Because even just a couple hours is enough for them to change. And this is after, of course, Ray and Robert did this little wrestling thing where he gets Robert in a headlock, and Debra comes back and tells him, just done what I do. Say you'll be tired, you'll get off. All in all, Your Place or Mine is a pretty fun episode. Has a nice little role reversal. Nice to see the two... Frank and Marie solo for a little bit. It does kind of have a couple little logical things. Like, I don't know if they would really go that far back, regressing-wise, just because their mother's there, but at least Ray would, and Robert's just exploiting the situation. Nice little dynamic between Frank and Marie. Yeah, one little zinger from Frank. So it's a very fun episode. This early, I don't know if I'd put it in my favorite episodes of this season. It'd be in the running, at least. This is the first of many episodes written by Jeremy Stevens. He wrote 3 this season. He wrote Neighbors, which is another pretty fun one. Don't know if it'd be in the running for favorites. And Fascinating Debra. Of course, next season wrote Brother, The Ride Along, and The Garage Sale. The middle of them is definitely one of my favorite episodes of that season. Lone Barone. and of course the finale. So he has a handful of pretty decent episodes under his belt. And it was directed by Howard Storm. I don't really bring up the directors when it comes to it, but he is a perennial sitcom director. Directed episodes of a lot of sitcoms, Major Dad, among others. So he knows what he's doing when it comes to directing a setup like this, and he does a decent job. That's part of the reason why I never really bring up the directors in these episodes, is because they don't really do much to stand out from one another. It's not like when you watch an episode of a drama TV show, whereas stylistically they usually are pretty similar from episode to episode, but there's a little bit more of a flip to differentiate it, but usually it's standardized. You know, unless you get someone big, like when and when CSI Miami got Rob Zombie. I haven't seen that episode yet, but from the few shots I've seen, you can definitely tell his handprints are all over it. It's like when Rob Zombie directed that episode of CSI Miami. You can tell his fingerprints are all over it, if from a casting standpoint alone. I know some people complain about him having his wife and everything, but she wouldn't act if it wasn't for her husband being director, and that's just not from the logical thing of, oh, no one else would cast her. It's like, she really had no interest in being an actress from what I've read up. On the whole, Your Place or Mine, pretty fun episode. Has some interesting character dynamics, a handful of interesting moments, a couple zingers. That one from Frank is definitely the highlight of it, and it is the first real Frank zinger of the entire show. I mean, some people might say freaking Fairyland, but that's not really a zinger to the same level as Slop to You, and it's something that his character would become known for as the series goes on, especially the next 3 seasons. I think that's where a lot of his great zingers come from. He has some good ones on the later seasons, but it's the as those seasons are the highlight of the entire show, as are his zingers in that one.